Welcome to the show, IB Nation Sports Talk. We're up and rolling. He's Jesse Stiers. I'm Sean Stiers. It looks. Did you put your bag of pretzels away? Can you talk after eating your pretzels? Are they making you thirsty?
They are. I just realized I should have grabbed some water too. But if anyone sees me munching on pretzels, it's been a long day. All right, I need to get some carbohydrates back into me.
Get the blood sugar back up once again. Is that
Yeah,
kind of?
and I might sneak one to Henry down here because he's always lurking for a snack.
Yeah, I'm sure he is. All right. Well, great to have you with us here tonight. If you haven't seen, we have just for our listeners, viewers, I guess, as it were, of the old YouTube show here, we're kicking some ideas around the possibility of maybe changing the start time of the show. So weigh in if you would. I've got a Twitter poll up, Brian. If for the subscribers to the Champions Lounge, Brian also has a poll up there. Would you rather have it? Would you rather the start time stay at 6 o'clock Eastern time or move up to 5 o'clock Eastern time? A little earlier potential start time for the
I
show.
vote 5 o'clock.
We're floating it out there. What'd you say?
I vote 5 o'clock.
You're 5 o'clock. See, I wasn't sure which way you would go on this. So you're 5 o'clock.
Yeah, I apologize. I didn't see the poll. I unfortunately, what's the best word? Terminated my Twitter last night.
Oh, did something happen?
No, I guess terminated's a little too harsh. I just deleted the app. I still have my account. I just no
Okay.
longer have it on my phone. There's just too much going on right now. My brain needs a break from all of it.
You know what? And this, I don't want to, go down the Elon Musk rabbit hole with this, but I just will say this. What's it been like 3 weeks
It's just
since Elon
controversy.
made? What's that?
It's just constant controversy.
Well, it's not the controversy. My timeline looks completely different than what it used to look like. And based on the articles I've read, it's because of all these people he's either laid off or who have quit Twitter. The algorithms are not working the same. Like my feed, for the purpose that I want my feed, which is basically a sports news feed so I can keep up with things that are going on.
That
It's
was
like
my primary reason.
every 3 tweets is a video for somebody, like selling a dog groomer or, like test the germs on your toothbrush or whatever. My feed looks completely different than what it used to look like. And again, it's because apparently of, the people who, used to keep that feed going in the right direction with the algorithms, they're not there anymore. So
right. Yeah, I just, the brain needs a little bit of a break. I think I'm going to start watching the nightly news to keep up on my everything. But I'm taking a break from the social medias for a while. My brain needs a rest from all of it.
Yep. I don't blame you. Sometimes you need a break anyway. See, Mr. 2.0 is going to go the other way. He'd rather have it go to 7 o'clock. I don't think we're going to go that direction, Mr. 2.0, but I do appreciate you being in here. Yeah. So again, you can chime in here if you'd want, or you can vote on either Twitter or in the Champions Lounge. 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. We're looking at potentially moving the live show. Of course, it does stay up archived. So like, someone has already said, as long as the show is there, it doesn't matter what time it actually starts because plenty of people watch it after the fact as well. Hit the like button if you would as you're logging in tonight. We do appreciate it. Subscribe, rate, review on all your podcast channels. We're already, speaking of Twitter, some snark on here. Tommy Guns tweeted this faux NFL statement today. It was all about Super Bowls and the home field advantage that Tampa and the Rams have had in the last 2 Super Bowls. You'd never had a Super Bowl played in a team play a Super Bowl in a home stadium until the last 2 years. And so he tweeted this fake NFL statement about, well, so they've decided they're going to correct it by playing every Super Bowl from henceforth in Arlington Stadium, AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas. So
that means that the
because
Cowboys
you never
will
have to worry about a
Super
home
Bowl.
field advantage, basically.
There we go. I think it's funny how that's aligned, though, because the NFL can't predict who's going to make the Super Bowl what year, and they have these host stadiums lined up for years out in advance. So it's kind of crazy when those coincidences happen or the stars align, I guess.
Yeah. apparently Elon's taken down spaces as well. Well, again, it takes the engineers that he used to have to keep spaces going. So I'm sure that that's probably why he's going to take it down. Like when you get rid of the people who are keeping your technology app going, I guess you've got problems. Well, and like Derek is saying, 4:30. So we've got all different. We're never going to be able to please everybody. I'll be interested to see what the results of these polls comes out. Keep it at 6:00. Move it to 5:00. Again, you can chime in whether it's on Twitter. We've got that poll up, and in the Champions Line, we've got it up as well. So we're in the middle of December. And basically, today, I didn't even realize this. Today is the halfway point between the end of the regular season and the bowl game. It's been exactly 17 days since the Irish played USC in the Coliseum, and there are exactly 17 days to go from right now until Notre Dame faces South Carolina in the Gator Bowl. So it's still, relatively early in the offseason, but we're at an important part of the offseason as well. Early signing period starts a week from tomorrow. There's going to be all kinds of special signing day programming going on right here throughout the day on the Irish Breakdown channels. And a year ago at this time, Notre Dame riding in the shiny glow of Marcus Freeman being named the head coach. The shock of Brian Kelly going to LSU, it wore off pretty quickly because they traded in an old reliable Bronco, and there was still that new car smell, with that modern Escalade that rolled into town with Marcus Freeman. So, there was no doubt at all a year ago at this time who was winning the offseason. It was Marcus Freeman. He owned it. He was getting love around the country from people who hated Notre Dame, because of the way that Brian Kelly left and the reaction of the team and the whole thing. Marcus Freeman was owning the offseason. But now here we are, a little more than a year later. There have been a few bumps along the way, that Marcus Freeman and company have kind of had to navigate. And I guess what we're going to kind of try to navigate and figure out ourselves today is Notre Dame winning this offseason as of right now, because you had the latest yesterday. Cane Berrong became the fourth player since the regular season ended to enter the transfer portal. You had Drew Pine, Cane Berrong, Jaden Bellamy, and Osita Ekwonu all entered the transfer portal. And, again, Berrong is the latest. So that's what we are discussing on today's show. Is Notre Dame winning this offseason? And I've got some thoughts. I'll kind of save them here for a little bit. We can kick some stuff around. But where did it measure, Jesse, on your radar when you heard that Cane Berrong was going to transfer from Notre Dame? Like what level of alarm bells went off? If we're going 1 to 5, what stage alarm went off when you heard Cane Berrong was leaving?
I would say probably stage 2. And I don't mean this to be kind of, Cane Berrong, tight end, right? And Notre Dame is known for their tight ends, and obviously Michael Mayer has been the premier tight end the last 3 years. But ultimately, it's a guy that hasn't played a whole bunch. He's had, the injury issues. It's not like he's a huge time, 4 or 5 star kind of level tight end. So for me, there really was no true alarm of like missing out on something, right? Like it's not like it'd be way different if this was like, Michael Mayer saying that he was leaving last year or maybe the year before that. But for me, it just wasn't. It wasn't like a suit. I put it like this: Dylan Edwards flipping his commitment meant more to me than this Berrong transfer. I guess is how I would look at it. Essentially, I think that there is a bigger loss with Dylan Edwards than there would, be Cane Berrong. I would say that Dylan Edwards was like a 4 on that scale compared to Cane, who's at like a 2.
Yeah, and I mean the thing with Berrong is we never got to see him at full strength. Unfortunately, he had the ACL injury last year. He was playing a little bit last year. He tears his ACL, and then it took him until the middle of basically a little bit more than a full calendar year to get back up to speed. And the only game that he played in this year, of course, was the snow game, which it's like you think, oh, he's coming back from ACL, and now it's snowing in the second half, and he's going to play. But we saw Cane Berrong out there, and it's not like we saw him make his mark in that game, and I don't mean that in a negative way by any means. But this is a guy who predominantly played some special teams last year, got a few offensive snaps last year. And again, because of the injury, we just never got to see him. He was the number 1 rated tight end in the country in his recruiting class. So there was a lot of promise and potential there. The thing I think that stood out to me over the last few days is we got to talk to both Marcus Freeman and Tommy Rees this weekend, and both of them were asked about Michael Mayer leaving as they gear up for this Gator Bowl and, sort of how that affects the offense. And both of them talked about Mitchell Evans and Holden Stays having their roles affected, but neither one of them mentioned Cane Berrong. What do you think about that?
To me, that kind of shows a couple of things. One, that this was kind of maybe expected. It just hadn't been maybe announced yet. And I think another thing is it just kind of shows, kind of a natural depth chart of where he stood in relation to the rest of the tight ends, which is probably, a factor or deciding factor that played into his overall departure, right? Like he's gone through injury issues. He's kind of, farther back or set back on the depth chart. And so when your head coach is kind of talking in that fashion, it seems like those were the things that were kind of being referenced without directly saying them, is he's lower on the depth chart, and they probably knew that there was inclination that he was thinking about leaving, or that, there was maybe even discussions that had already been had.
Yeah. Holden Stays started the season at the bottom of Notre Dame's tight end depth chart, but now by the end of the season, he's number 2, basically behind Mitchell Evans. And of course, Mitchell Evans had to come back from an injury of his own. Now, a lot of that depth chart obviously has to do with some injuries as well, because you've got, like Eli Raridan was playing and he's injured. He's out for the year, re-torn ACL. Kevin Bauman is out once again. But even, again, Berrong was back, and even after he was healthy enough to play, Stays was still ahead of him. And apparently, just based on kind of looking at things, that didn't really change. Like, they talked about these younger guys and guys who hadn't played as much getting a lot of reps these first few days of practice that they had last week. Berrong never elevated. So, again, not being there and being able to see it, it's obviously very hard to judge exactly, where he was. Was he clearly behind these guys and that kind of thing? But obviously, he felt like it was a situation where it was best for him to move on, because again, like Rees and Freeman asked about tight ends with Michael Mayer gone, and you didn't hear anything about Cane Berrong being asked. And so now again, you've got Drew Pine, Jaden Bellamy, Cane Berrong, who has a couple years of eligibility remaining, Osita Ekwonu. You've got 4 guys who have transferred since the season has ended, entered the transfer portal anyway since the season has ended. And you also have a couple of decommitments. The biggest one, 4-star running back Dylan Edwards from the 2023 class. Of course, he flipped to Colorado. But then you've also got in next year's class, 2024 defensive lineman, another 4-star guy, Brandon Davis Swain. So Freeman, at his press conference on Saturday, he was asked about having the hard conversations with players about where they are in the pecking order, where they stand, what their roles look like going forward. And here's what Freeman had to say about that.
You're very honest and you're very clear with your expectations. If there's questions about what's my role in the bowl game, and I don't know if I can give you a specific answer, we're not going to make any promises. And that's what we can't do. That does a disservice to your program, but also to that kid. You start making promises that you don't know if you can fulfill, you lose that trust factor that you have between you and that player. But you have to be as honest as you can. So I told our coaches, we have to be honest with our players. We had to be honest with, and I love Drew Pine. But part of that love for him was to say, possibly looking into the transfer portal, take a quarterback. And I could have not told him, said we're not going to take a quarterback and waited until after the game and said, hey, we're going to look for a quarterback. But that's not what we're built on. We're built on real, authentic relationships and having those honest conversations. And you know what? Drew made the best decision for Drew. And I say it's the best because he made it. And I love him. Again, and we're so grateful for what he did for our program this year. And I wish him all the best. But I'll never go back and regret the conversation that we had about our plans moving forward. And I can't wait to see him thrive and do great things in college football this upcoming year. And we all have to continue to move forward, again, my job is to make decisions and continue to evaluate what's best for our football program, and that's what I'll continue to do.
So Marcus Freeman kind of segued on his own from a general conversation about having the hard conversations with these guys about where they stand on the depth chart, what's going on at their position. Like he said, he told Drew Pine that they're bringing in a transfer quarterback in the offseason. So, Jess, you've been part of college teams. Like when you listen to Marcus Freeman there talk about having those conversations with guys, are you up? Are you agreeing with what he's talking about?
Yeah, 100%. I think that the most respect I had for my college coaches are the ones that were, the ones that were upfront and honest with you and told you what you needed to do and, where you stood. And a lot of that usually came at the end of the season when we had what were called exit interviews, going into the off season and preparing for weight training and then, ultimately coming back for spring ball. But you just like to have an honest, picture painted on where you stand within the team, things you need to work on, and etc. And I thought the biggest things that Marcus Freeman brought up were promises and trust. And that was a lot of the issues that I kind of had or faced during college is I had a coach that made a lot of promises to a lot of people, right? And then ultimately that ends up into obviously, broken promises and no longer there being any sort of trust. And that was another big word that Freeman brought up was trust. And playing in today's era, I was talking about this with actually my boss today at work, you don't want to hold these guys hostage by any means, right? Like there are so many opportunities for guys to go out there. And when you make promises that, oh, these guys are going to play, oh, these guys are going to play, you're almost kind of manipulating the mind of some of these players because then they hang around on these words that you said of, you're going to get this time or, I promise you're going to get your chance. And then you never really get it. And it's really frustrating, at least for myself, because I felt like I did a lot of things kind of that I was asked to do. And it ended up kind of being some empty promises on the backside, for whatever those reasons were. And those that I respect Marcus Freeman a lot for that. And I think you're going to build a really good program when you and your players have that level of trust between each other and knowing kind of what's coming.
You can't, like you said, you can't just make empty promises to keep guys around so you have a nice looking depth chart. Like you can't do that because then what ends up happening in the long run, guys are just even more upset. They keep investing, they keep doing things that either their position coach, their head coach, their coordinator, whoever is telling them to do. And if they're meeting certain benchmarks and they're not moving anywhere, then I think that it just becomes a situation where it can become toxic because then you don't want unhappy guys, grumbling guys roaming around in your program because then it just makes things even worse. And I'm not saying that that's Cane Berrong by any means because obviously he decided to enter the transfer portal. I'm just saying you don't want to make empty promises, and it doesn't sound like that's what Marcus Freeman is doing. We've talked before about he's having these open, honest conversations with these guys, and some guys have decided to move on. So far, it's only 4. But the other side of this, and something that's a little bit curious about the timing of this, just in terms of what kind of conversations took place or didn't take place or, that kind of thing, is Freeman also said Saturday that there weren't going to be any more bowl opt-outs and there weren't going to be any more players entering the transfer portal before the bowl game.
That was what last week was for. Those, we're off the road. We had those 2 weeks ago after the USC game. We had those conversations. We gave them time to really reflect and make decisions. And we told them by this past week we wanted to make sure that our guys had made decisions on opting out or going into the transfer portal. So, again, I can't predict the future, but I don't anticipate anybody else not playing in the bowl game or going into the portal right now.
So something happened, and I'm not playing, aha, gotcha here by any means, but he did just stand up there Saturday and say there's not going to be, he didn't anticipate any more, but then just 2 days after he said that, Cane Berrong goes into the portal. So I guess my, bigger picture now, are you concerned that we could see even more, guys, enter the portal or whatever in these next 17 days or, maybe even in the next week before the bowl game?
I would be actually surprised if we saw one, and I would be kind of shocked if we saw two at this point, because what Marcus Freeman presents and not is compared to what a lot of coaches don't do is he's honest. He's having these conversations with people and he's giving them a hard ultimatum of saying, I'm going to give you the honest truth. So in return, I need you to give me the honest truth. Do you want to stay or do you want to leave? So, I really think that on his end, he's done everything to kind of lay the boundaries of, that the guys need to have these decisions made and hopefully that they are respecting that. And I think that's why I would be shocked is because Marcus Freeman is respecting everyone else. And so I think in return, you're going to see him being respected because this isn't like a lot of coaches, a lot of coaches and kind of back to what we were talking about, when you make empty promises and things like that, recruits get a hold of that information, right? Like guys aren't gonna be able, you get a reputation built for yourself. And I think that Marcus Freeman is trying to build that honest relationship amongst his players and recruits and, saying, I'm a man of my word, essentially, whatever I say, I'm going to follow up with. So that trickles down to recruits. And so that's a really good sign to see going forward.
Yeah. That's exactly right. And as Tyler said, that's why you have to be honest with kids. The programs that have a lot of transfers, some of that is because the coaches lied to players about playing time. And I completely agree. I think that happens quite a bit. And again, coaches are more concerned about themselves and, and again, having the depth chart and whatever else. And, so where they are, like if you look again at the tight end position, you've got Raritan hopefully coming back next year. I already saw the comment about, that Anthony said when healthy, Raritan has a chance to be the next great tight end. And that's absolutely right. But the big concern with Raritan now is can he stay healthy because he had the ACL in high school. He had the ACL this year. It's very unfortunate. One ACL tear is bad enough and now he's got to work his way back and come back and hopefully get, healthy and ready to go. So, but you've got them and you've got an incoming freshman next year as well. And of course, then you've got Kevin Bauman coming back also next year. So you're still going to have a pretty full tight end room and you're going to have a lot of talent. It's still a position that Notre Dame has done very well with. You're not going to have necessarily a Michael Mayer, but you're still going to be pretty deep at the tight end position. And again, maybe that played into, whatever conversation Marcus Freeman / Tommy Rees may, or, / Jared Parker may have had with Cane Berrong about kind of what lies in store for him potentially in the future with where he is in the pecking order and that kind of thing. So again, if it's that honest stuff and he's decided to make a decision for himself, that's fine. When you look at the balance of what's happened in these 17 days, you always see polar ends of the spectrum. It doesn't seem like most people in here are panicking by any means, because again, you've only seen 4 guys go into the transfer portal, and the most prominent of them being Drew Pine, who, yes, started 10 games, helped you win 8 of those 10 games, but he did open the season as the backup quarterback. If Tyler Buckner hadn't become injured, we may, have never seen Drew Pine, or we may have just seen him in small doses, like we ended up seeing Steve Angeli in small doses this season. But again, 17 days since the regular season ended, 8 days to go until signing day, with a couple of decommitments in the last week, one in each class, 2023 and 2024. 17 days to go until the bowl game. Where are you right now? Is Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame, are they winning the offseason at this point?
For me, it doesn't really feel like they're winning or losing. It feels like they're kind of in this neutral mode right now, and kind of you're losing off kind of the dead weight or the fat right now, right? Like you're kind of condensing your roster. You're losing guys to the portal. You're losing guys, for whatever it might be, and they're not making any portal moves yet. It just seems like the focus is right now on recruiting. So I would say they're definitely winning the recruiting, right? Like that's a big thing that's going on right now because of finals. At the end of the season, they get a little time off. They prepare for finals. Obviously, there's bowl prep. But this is a big window for a lot of closing down this recruiting class. And so for that reason, I think that we've kicked it into kind of second or third gear out of that neutral state when talking about winning the offseason. And so, the recruitment going forward compared to losing a couple of these players when, let's be honest, at the end of every season, you lose a couple of players, right? Like no one,
Yeah.
The roster is never exactly the same. But I would say that the only thing that kind not really concerns me, but there just hasn't what really seems to be they're not actively interested in the portal right now, right? Like it just seems like the main concern is finishing up this recruiting class, getting through this bowl game, preparing for this bowl game, and then seeing what lies ahead with the transfer portal after the season kind of concludes. So for me, I would say that they're definitely not losing, but they're not like excelling in this offseason, but they're winning. Overall, it's a net positive in my eyes.
Yeah, I mean, they've again, for the most part, the transfers have been depth guys. And that's what we talked about at the start of this process after the season ended, that we were likely to see guys enter the transfer portal, but the majority of them were likely to be depth guys. Now, and that's pretty much what you've had so far. Again, you had Drew Pine and then three other guys. Jaden Bellamy didn't see the field at all this year. Ekwonu hasn't played a whole lot. And, again, Cane Berrong has not played a lot. A highly thought of tight end coming out of high school, but guys who haven't made a dent. So, like, this offseason is still young. So maybe we're getting close to the end of the first quarter, like if we're going to use a football game, as our analogy, like we're getting close to the end of the first quarter. Maybe they're trailing, like by a touchdown or 7-0 or something like that at this point. Because when you mix in the decommitment, I think that, that obviously freaks some people out, especially as talented as a guy like Dylan Edwards is. But again, we talked about Edwards on the show. I guess that's been exactly a week ago today. As a matter of fact, we talked about him on the show, and you still have a lot of talent. He is, as of now, you lost Keon Keeley early on, like earlier. So in the last 17 days, that hasn't happened, and so I'm kind of keeping it more to what's happened in these last 17 games. Maybe you're down by a touchdown or so, but you're still pretty early. The biggest thing is what happens 8 days from now at this point. If they can get that class together, get them to sign on the dotted line, that's the big thing for them. And then you move forward. You're ready for the Gator Bowl. You come out of the Gator Bowl. You're into your winter conditioning and all that kind of stuff. And as some other people I've already seen say here is, they're more maybe concerned about what happens after spring when the next transfer portal window opens. I mean, as of right now, there's nothing when I look at any of these transfers that makes me panic, because you have right now the number 3 recruiting class in the country coming in. You have a very talented freshman class. Many of those guys you expect to start to see make some impact next season. That's where, like, if you're losing some guys, it's offset by the fact that you've got a lot of talent coming in the next couple of years. Some of the comments, Lance says he feels like he shouldn't worry about the transfer portal till after the second, transfer portal window closes, especially if you've gotten a transfer quarterback. And that's a good point. The transfer portal quarterback, like if they announced a transfer portal quarterback tomorrow, that could offset a lot of angst that a lot of people already have right now.
Yeah, I feel like that is if Notre Dame came out and got a transfer quarterback, I think that like there would be no more concerns really this offseason, right? Like even the bowl result, I don't think would affect a lot of people. I just think that everyone going forward wants to know that they're actively upgrading at quarterback. And you made a good point too. It's not like these guys who are leaving are, like the Benjamin Morrison. Like if that was the type of guy who was leaving, then you're like, okay, we're in a little bit of panic mode here. Or maybe if one of the, or Estime or Diggs transferred, then you'd be like, okay, maybe we need to look at some things. But you're not losing big depth pieces. You're just, like I said, it just feels like some of the excess is falling off, kind of not dead weight, because that kind of can be seen as, not giving these guys their credit, but ultimately it's guys who just really haven't contributed on the field yet. And I think they know that their opportunity is kind of passing them, and they're looking for an opportunity to basically play, right? Like they know if they want to play to a certain extent, they're going to have to go somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. And there's still a heck of a lot that can happen in the meantime. Hang on just a second. Got to get rid of something here. We got that. There we go. Some other comments that I saw. Salty was saying he's worried about the portal every single day, and it's now a little scary logging in to Champions Lounge. But, I think that's kind of where you sit at this time of year. Everyone's sitting on a little bit of pins and needles waiting for things to happen. But I think it's mostly just like again, like you start to see one or two guys go and you're worried that it's going to be this flood of guys. I don't think that we're going to see that. I don't think that we're going to see it at all. So maybe, it's like worried about going to the doctor's appointment or going to the dentist. I think, it can be painful, but how painful is it really going to be? John says he thinks that they'll lose some defensive backs, maybe not now, but maybe after the bowl game. They've been passed up. And again, this is like Jaden Bellamy, for example. Jaden came in lowest rated of the guys, in the current freshman class, and with Benjamin Morrison and Jaden Mickey both having some success, and then the fact that you've got some veterans, you've got Cam Hart and Clarence Lewis both coming back as well, and then again you've got some more talented guys on the way. Where's the potential opportunity for Jaden Bellamy? It's probably in his best interest if he really wants to play, especially by next year, that he looks around, and so maybe we do see some more young guys take off. I think that it's fair to be, I don't know if worrying is even the right word, but at least to be wondering if something like that is going to happen. And I agree with what John says, that, the biggest thing is that many times the decommitments result in upgrades. I think that's true as well. And Coffee's for closers. Stock is still up on Notre Dame football. Improvement at QB1 via portal, or Tyler Buckner steps it up. The future is bright. And that's as long as the guys at the top of the depth chart and, some of these other guys, like key young guys, the 4-star type guys who are on the roster who we haven't seen, as long as those guys stay put, I think they're fine. I'm not, again, maybe they're trailing a little bit, mostly because of the decommit last week, but I would still be feeling pretty good if I'm Notre Dame. And what John says, must win the bowl game. I'm still like, how important, and I'm not saying it's not important to win, but like when you're looking at, like what residual are you going to get by winning the Gator Bowl? Big picture, what does that get you? Just the fact that you won the Gator Bowl? Where do you place the importance on that, Jess?
Yeah, so I actually was hoping that we'd get to this comment. I think you go in with the mentality, of course, this is a must-win game. Like there's no, you prepare for like you would against USC, Ohio State, whoever it might be. This is definitely you go in with this is a must-win, but it's not do or die if they win or lose this game. Sure, it's always great to win your bowl game because that's like the encapsulating, into your season. It's like your final grade, right? Like if you're taking a class all semester and then you have to take your final exam. To me, that's often what these bowl games are, outside of not playing in the major bowl games. It's like your final exam to kind of give yourself that final grade of the season and see kind of how far you come individually and how far you come as a team. And I think another big thing is it just gives you, when you win, it sets the stage for next season. It gives you momentum for next season. It makes you feel good about next season, especially, with Notre Dame's opponent. They're going to play a tier 1 SEC school. And yeah, South Carolina has some guys that are, transfer portaling or whatever it might be, but so does Notre Dame. So it's going to be equal playing field of both teams are going to, figure out what they have going forward while also determining, ultimately the success of their season. And I'm not saying the entire success is driven by this bowl game, but again, it's like your final grade overall of determining, how you feel individually and how you feel as a team at the end of the season.
Yeah, see, like you talked about the momentum, and I've seen other people say it as well. I've just never generally bought into the importance of momentum going into the offseason,
You just
because
never want to lose the last game, though.
no, and I agree, but like the whole, it gets you momentum going into the offseason. Again, like once you play that bowl, you're going to lose a lot of players from your roster, whether they're NFL, graduation, or even transfer. So what your team looks like on January 2nd, or January whatever, after all the bowls, or after you play your last game, whenever it happens to be, late December, early January, compared to 9 months later when you play your first game, I've just never really bought into the momentum aspect of it. Do you want to lose? Absolutely not. Are you playing to win? Absolutely yes. But I've never been a big believer that there's that much actual carryover into the offseason, just because of the natural turnover that you have on your roster that everyone has every year afterwards.
Yeah. And I agree. And like you said, it's not like this must-win game, but you just go into it like every other game. And if you lose, obviously it's not the same of losing in the playoffs, a New Year's Six bowl game. It's not the end of the world. It's just obviously the season always feels better, and the upcoming season always feel better when you can end your season with a solid victory.
Yeah. Anthony says Brian's a believer in the momentum, and that's fine. He's entitled to his opinion, and I'm entitled to mine. Like we don't agree 100% on everything. He knows a lot about football, and he's allowed to believe that all he wants. But again, I just think that because of the like it's not like someone sitting around in the middle of January when winter workouts start and was like, yeah, we won the Gator Bowl, let's work harder this off season. I just don't buy into that. Again, you want to win. I think that's, winning every game possible is what you're out there trying to do. That's the objective every game. But I just, like, I don't know what that buys you extra. I don't think that a lot of recruits are sitting there going, man, you got to win the Gator Bowl. Like, it didn't affect anything really, when they lost the Fiesta Bowl last year. I think the bigger picture is your recruits see you on TV, and they know where they're going. And no matter what happens in any game, you can always tell the recruits, you can make us better just by being here. So,
yeah.
I think that's the bigger impact for me. I wanted to see if there were any other comments before we move on. I don't believe so. So, Jesse, are you ready for rapid fire?
Oh, I'm always ready for rapid fire.
Awesome. Well, here we go. So, unfortunately, we start off with a little somber news. Mississippi State head coach Mike Leach passed away, of course, earlier today. My question, when you think of Mike Leach, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
To me, the first thing that I thought of, there were two things I thought of, and one could be taken as a bad thing, and I'll get to that here in a second. But the number one thing that I think of with Mike Leach is just his overall funniness, right? Like, he was such a quirky, kind of free thinking, outside of the box guy. He is like, if you made a cookie cutter mold of what a college football coach is, he's like the complete opposite.
He's not it.
Yeah, he's the complete opposite of everything, that a college coach is. And then at the same time, you can ask him any question at any time, right? Like, if you ask Nick Saban some of these questions, he'd tell you to piss off. But Mike Leach will give you a very funny, kind of thoughtful response. Like, everyone knows it for him for his marriage advice, right? And and his I saw this video of him this season where he was taking chairs away from some of his players because they didn't deserve them, right? So it's just like the quirkiness, the funniness, and the lightheartedness were a lot of things I enjoyed about Leach. And I actually watched an interview today with Lane Kiffin on ESPN. He did something this morning, and what he talked about is he was one of the few coaches that he like look forward to meeting before games, right? Like, you see all these coaches before games, they go up midfield, and basically Kiffin was like, no one wants to go out there, right? None of these coaches want to talk to you. It's just like a glancing hello, good luck, whatever. But he said he always looked forward to Mike Leach because that is someone that was just always so nice to him, so always so embraceful for him. And he said the same thing when they went to like SEC coaches meetings. Like, when you get down there, it's all these coaches hate each other, but there's Mike Leach, talking to everyone, making sure, he's giving his rounds, right? And so that's the first thing I remembered. And then I obviously remember the Texas Tech situation where he decided to put a player was concussed, put a player in a shed because there's no light in a shed. So, of course, how could he get worse if he's in a shed? Obviously, that went the wrong way. But that's I think of his time at Texas Tech, Michael Crabtree when he was down there. And I think another thing that I know I'm kind of rambling here, but Mike Leach was such a great coach wherever he was at. He was in 3 different power conferences, right? He was in the Big 12, he was in the Pac-12, and he was in the SEC. And Kiffin was talking about, everyone talked about Mike Leach saying, oh, when he takes that next step, his offense isn't going to make it because he's going to go against better defenses. They're going to, scout him out, whatever. Lane Kiffin said in this last game that they played at the end of the season, he had his players calling out the exact route that Mississippi State was going to run. Everyone knows what Mike Leach is going to run, but he runs it to perfection. And he said, his corners knew what were coming, and he still, the quarterback still executed it with perfect timing and executed the play. So, there's a lot to unwrap when it comes to Mike Leach. And I think at the end of the day, like I said, I just enjoyed his lightheartedness and quirkiness. There was never a bad time with him. It always seemed like he was enhancing the moment rather than kind of declining the moment.
Yeah, I mean, he was an offensive innovator. The air raid offense, it's common phrase now. You hear about air raid all the time, but the roots go back to Mike Leach and Hal Mumme back in their early days, like 30-some years ago. And again, offensive innovator. He became known as the Pirate. He wrote that book with Bruce Feldman a few years back. It was like Swing Your Sword or something like that, back when he was still at Texas Tech. But you're right, like, he was just the guy. He was an original, a unique personality who I think you started off by saying it. When you think of cookie cutter, he was far from a cookie cutter kind of guy. He never gave the canned cliche responses. He always had his unique spin on everything. And I saw somebody bring up the candy corn, and I saw that in one of the things that I saw, an interview that I saw with him. Like, he's talking about how bad candy corn is and that kind of stuff. And it's he just always had his own unique spin and sort of, his own little flair for everything. Just an original is what he was. Like Hank Hill said, he mowed against the grain. Mike Leach, he was not going to go with the grain. Interesting that Carter Carls, a guy who used to be on the beat, covered recruiting for the South Bend Tribune here in town for a while, and he's down at Florida State now. Carter interviewed Mike Leach a few years back, and they were talking about Ian Book, because Ian Book originally committed to Washington State before he flipped to Notre Dame. And Carter said that Mike Leach told him that Ian Book would have led the nation in passing if he had gone to Wazoo instead of Notre Dame. I think that's very interesting. That's how badly Mike Leach, like when people think of Ian Book and what they saw at Notre Dame and what Mike Leach apparently saw in Ian Book, but when he was recruiting him, a lot different take. Like, if that's like, you talk about rewriting history, I would like to have seen that, what Ian Book would have looked like in that air raid offense.
Yeah, and that is actually a really good point, because, nothing against Notre Dame and Ian Book, but I think he would have been a better quarterback in Mike Leach's system. And now that I think about it, he's like the ideal quarterback to kind of run that offense, essentially. So always, shoulda, coulda, woulda, but man, it is ultimately just so sad. Like, if you want to have some good laughs, just YouTube, Mike Leach funny moments, and you could watch hours on hours of just different clips. I watched one today of him discussing which Pac-12 mascot would win in a fight. And it's like, he gave a very thoughtful answer. It wasn't like he was going through mascot by mascot, naming their pros and cons, and
he
then
actually put some thought to it. Yeah, exactly. That's right. He's analyzing the mascots. And like Stymie said there, a little bit like the Bill Walton of college football. That's probably a good way to put it. Each of them in their own way, So he will definitely be missed. College football is going to miss him because there just aren't many guys like him who are willing to just be themselves.
Right.
And again, not give the canned response, but just tell you what he really thinks and have a unique spin on what he really thinks about everything. So here's a comment from first-year Notre Dame special teams coordinator Brian Mason, talking about his special teams units the last 5 years. I'll go ahead and play it for you. It's a short clip. I'll let you hear what Brian Mason had to say about Notre Dame's special teams units.
Objective to be number one in the country. Before coming in, the last 5 years we were never in the top 25, which I think certainly was an underachievement. This year we finished the regular season 5th in the country. We want to make improvements to be number one.
So there you go. Short and sweet. Brian Mason. Underachievement the last few years. Mason says, what do you think when you hear that?
Oh, I 100% agree that there has been vast underachievement, especially considering, what we've seen this year and the opportunities and extra possessions that Notre Dame has created with their special teams. And there's no reason that you can't, I get it. You're not going to have 7-8 blocked punts per season, whatever that might be. But there's a difference between having a concerted effort to be good on special teams and then just to have the mentality of just to float or not do anything negative, just to get by. And I think that's been the frustrating part. And what's been so refreshing about him is that he wants to elevate. He wants their special teams just to be, as important as their offense or their defense. And it's a third unit of the game, obviously. So I'm just happy that the mentality has switched from, oh, no one blocks punts, or, oh, no one returns punts anymore, or, oh, it's just about being average, not really making mistakes. And that's how complacency kind of, starts. And it should be about how can we change the game through special teams, because these are extra opportunities that we get to change the game.
Absolutely. And, he's straight up throwing shade. Brian Polian and Brian Kelly, when he says it, which they were always in safety mode. They were always playing it safe. And I get, and he said it himself, Brian Mason has, that the first objective of a punt return man is to make sure that you secure the football. That's great, but that should not be your only objective of the punt return man. And all the excuses about nobody's blocking punts anymore, it's no different than an offensive coordinator looking at film of a defense during the week and figuring out, oh, when they line up this way, we can do this. That's exactly what it is for Brian. That's how those punt blocks result. It's something that you see, and if it's there, you know how you're going to attack it. You're going to have a pretty good chance to get it. He went on. I mean, he talked about a lot of different things the other day, but he also, was talking about how, like fake punts and fake kicks and stuff like that. And again, he said, they've had some stuff set up and ready to go during the season, but if you don't get the look, you're not going to do it. You're not just going to do it to do it. There's a certain look that you're looking for. And if you get it, you're going to fake it. And, they just haven't seen it yet. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. And it's very refreshing to see that there are actually guys who are taking it seriously and they're not just playing it safe out there. Because like when you look at, and what's interesting about this matchup with South Carolina, Notre Dame is the 5th best special teams units in the nation. South Carolina is number 1. Where does that come from? Shane Beamer, the son of Frank Beamer, of course, when he was at Virginia Tech, and Frank Beamer was known for his special teams. He was the guy who was known for, it's not just that other phase that does not have any impact on the game. Like Notre Dame, you're talking about the top 2 teams in blocked kicks this season, South Carolina and Notre Dame. And what's interesting is Clemson is one of the top kick block teams in the country too, and Clemson didn't get any against Notre Dame. So there'll be an over-under coming on block kicks for the Gator Bowl once we get closer. I'm sure.
Well, and it's, and I guess I'll throw a little shade at Brian Polian myself now. There's a reason why Mr. Polian has been, largely just a special teams coordinator over the last however many years. And a guy like, Coach Mason, he's going to get his opportunity to be a head coach because, this is how you stand out. Like if you can prove that you can schematically get it done in special teams where you're very limited on the chances you get, imagine what you could do, as a coordinator, a position coach, whatever it might be. And so those things stick out. And so when you're constantly trying to elevate and take the most of your opportunities, that sticks out. And that just shows to me that Coach Mason is eventually going to get his turn and is going to continue to kind of climb, the coaching ranks because of, how seriously he takes his job, no matter what it might be. A lot of people might think, oh, it's just special teams. But like I said, there's so many different opportunities in a game where special teams can lead to big time changing plays.
And you get less time to prepare during the week for special teams as well.
Yeah, you only get like 3 periods per practice. You don't get a lot of committed time.
That's exactly right. You got one of your fans chiming in, Jesse the Man.
One of the small group. We're a small club.
I'm sure it's bigger than you think. Okay, so Dylan McCullough, of course, the running backs coach at Notre Dame. Both of his sons have committed to the University of Oklahoma. The defensive end, Dasan McCullough, was at Indiana. He entered the transfer portal last week, and he has picked Oklahoma over Notre Dame. Dasan was the number 43 prospect in the 2022 class and a standout true freshman at Indiana this past season. And his brother, Day, who was a senior at South Bend St. Joseph this season, is a safety. He committed to OU as well. So my question to you, and this comes from, again, some comments that I've seen from fans, is this a bad look on Dylan and Notre Dame that his sons picked Oklahoma over Notre Dame?
People are going to make this a big deal, but at the end of the day, and I thought it was funny because I saw that his, the one son was in the transfer portal and the one son was, basically deciding where he wants to go now that high school is over. And I just had a very funny feeling that it was going to be a package deal. And it reminded me a lot of the Tranquil brothers when I was kind of going through high school and stuff. Is those guys wanted to play together, but ultimately, Drew was just obviously better than his brother who played cornerback. And I think they both wanted to play at Purdue at some point, and that was kind of the plan. But then, Drew got Notre Dame and, things kind of shifted. But to me, it always felt like it was going to be a package deal that they were going to go together. But at the end of the day, it's really not a big deal. And I'll tell you why, because, these kids have lived with their father their entire life. They see him every single day. He's been around, coaching them, teaching them, probably doing backyard drills with them, all this stuff. It's their time to grow their wings, leave the nest, and be their own guys. I don't see anything wrong with them kind of wanting to forge their own path going forward, kind of getting away, branching off, and becoming independent of, who their father is, essentially.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, you look at Mike Bianco. Use this as an example. Mike Bianco is the head baseball coach at Ole Miss. They just won the national championship this past season. So he's been the head coach at Ole Miss for a long time. His son didn't play for him at Ole Miss. He played for Palmineri at LSU. So like you're talking about a national championship level coach. He let his son go play someplace else. He didn't force his hand in the decision. And like you look at the McCulloughs, like Dylan McCullough was just at Indiana last year, and his son was obviously at Indiana last year. Well, Dylan is now at Notre Dame, and he wants to become, like a college head coach at some point. And to become a college head coach, he's going to have to become a coordinator. Well, look how quickly Lance Taylor came and went at Notre Dame. He went from running backs coach to offensive coordinator, and now he's the head coach at Western Michigan. So who's to say, like if Dasan had decided he's going to go to Notre Dame, who's to say that Dylan is even going to be around in a couple of years? And I'm not, like because of his career goals, like he could move on again. Like they already were at the same place once, and now Dylan went someplace else, and he could be someplace else in a couple of years. So just because he would have come here is, that's one thing. The other thing, though, is he's an undergrad transfer. And what have we talked about with undergrad transfers? It's not as easy to get an undergrad transfer into Notre Dame as it is a graduate transfer because a graduate transfer already has his degree in hand. So you don't have to worry about department heads and, deans and, credits transferring and all those different things. And I'm not saying this good or bad either way, but guys also obviously have to meet the academic requirements of Notre Dame. And I have no idea what his, transcripts look like and all that stuff. But, my point is it's harder to get undergrad transfers in at Notre Dame than it is a graduate transfer. And in fact, Marcus Freeman, that's something else that he was asked about at his press conference Saturday. And here's his comments on that.
Very clear transparency between myself, our admissions, our coaches. Yeah, it's difficult, but we understand that this university is difficult for anybody to get in, and that's what makes it so unique. And we can't dilute that. We can't take that for granted as a football program. The things we sell in terms of not just playing national championship caliber football, but being a part of a university that offers you so much. We have to embrace that and understand not every recruit or not every football player is going to be the right fit for this university. This is what we chose. This is what I chose. This is what these coaches chose. And so we can't pick and choose when we want to embrace that. We want to embrace it when we sell Notre Dame, right? You can play top-notch caliber football, the best, be developed, but you're also getting education that is top-notch. We can't want to sell that to high school kids, and then all of a sudden transfer portal comes. Who cares about that education? We just want the best football player. We can't do that. We can't pick and choose. We have to embrace what makes this place special, the opportunity to play at Notre Dame special. And listen, we understand that it takes certain individuals academically to be able to transfer in here, but if they're good students and their credits transfer over, and it's the right fit for us and for them, we'll be able to get them in.
Yeah. So, the question arose, he was basically asked, you've been here for a year. Is the whole undergraduate thing, has it changed at all? Has there been any movement in that? Has there been any sort of change in attitude from the top on getting undergraduate transfers in? And you heard him talk about it right there. It ain't changing. It doesn't sound like it is changing. And, so again, like when you couple that with what we were just talking about, you had a kid who is a freshman who's going to transfer now, so you still have to deal with that. It's still an issue. So I don't see any issue with either one of McCullough's kids, going to Oklahoma. And especially when you combine the fact that he would have been an undergrad transfer trying to move up here. I don't sweat it.
Yeah, and I thought Freeman brought up another really good point that I don't think a lot of people often think of is, a lot of these universities have credits or classes very specific, to their university. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about transferring, you could almost lose half a year, even a year of, college credits just because, Notre Dame has a very certain criteria of what classes transfer over, right? Like these kind of smaller, how do I put it? There's very calculus is calculus wherever you go, right? Like chemistry is chemistry wherever you go. But there's certain classes that freshmen take that just, even sophomores, that just don't transfer over because they're very specific to the school that they go to.
No, that's exactly right. And like when I was still in high school and I had a couple different offers from a couple junior colleges to go wrestle at these junior colleges in Kansas, and started talking to them about that very thing. A junior college is only a 2-year school. So once you're done at the junior college, you have to go someplace else. And, what they started talking about was like, even if you went to another school in state, there was no guarantee that your coursework was going to transfer. And so we're talking about junior colleges to predominantly other state schools. And so when you're talking about a private school and an institution like Notre Dame, I think it's even more magnified. So yeah, right. There's just no guarantee what you're taking at one place is going to transfer to another. And that's why it becomes so complicated when you're talking about undergrad transfers.
Exactly.
Okay, next one. Buy or sell. The transfer portal, as it is set right now, they have made adjustments to it. The current window is a 45-day window that obviously started last week, and it runs for 45 days through the middle of January. So do you buy or sell that this current window should only be open after the bowl games in January and not open right now for
Yeah,
transfers?
I'm actually a fan of opening it once the season like is concluded and over because we talked about the thing with Drew Pine, and I have no problems with him leaving. I just felt that my only qualm was that job wasn't finished, the season wasn't finished type situation, and so I see it on the end of if you want to transfer, you don't want to potentially get hurt in the bowl game. But let's be realistic. Transferring now, it's not like Drew Pine or going into the portal now. It's not like Drew Pine's going to come out of the portal, go meet up with his new team and be dressed for the bowl game or getting into any workouts. Like, regardless of when you go into the transfer portal and when you decide, like, you still have to wait until the season's over before you can actually get in there and start, training with the team, whatever it might be. So for me, I personally think that the portal should open the day after the day after your season ends. Essentially, if your season ends today, then you could go into the transfer portal tomorrow. If your season ended 3 weeks ago, you can go the day after. If you're in a New Year's Six bowl game, you should be able to go in after. But I just think that there's no real advantage to going into the portal now, and the season's not really over yet in my eyes. And so to me, you have to finish. You should not have to, but it should be like almost like a civic duty to just finish out the season, finish what you started.
Yep. Lance says he agrees the portal should be after bowl games. I like what you're saying. Whenever your season ends, that's when you can go into the portal. Whenever your bowl, if your team's not going to a bowl, which is increasingly harder all the time, as many bowls as there are. But if your team's not going to a bowl, you can go into the portal right away. I think it would make things a lot easier for like things that are going on right now. It's like it's one thing for guys to be getting ready for finals and to be getting ready for a bowl game and all these other things, but to throw the transfer portal into the mix, I think it just, mucks things up quite a bit. And it's open to the middle of January already. Now it accelerates things a little bit, like if you get into the portal and you decide you're going to go someplace in the spring. But again, like if you played a bowl game next week, and I think some bowls do start next week. And then the day after your bowl game or the night after your bowl game, you can go right in the portal. You still have plenty of time. So I completely agree. I think that you push it back to then till whenever your season is over, and that's when you can go in. I just think that there's just too much stuff going on with adding the transfer portal before your bowl game into the mix. Decaf 18, his son is stationed in Kansas at Fort Riley. Used to drive by Fort Riley all the time. As a matter of fact, that was the final duty station my grandpa was in before he retired from the Army, and then he moved to Lawrence, Kansas, where KU is, but Junction City, where most of my mom's family is from, and we lived in Manhattan on the other side of Fort Riley. So I'm very familiar with Fort Riley, Kansas. You've driven past it many times in your life as well.
Many of times.
That's right. It's like you're getting closer to Salina when you pass Fort Riley there.
Yep.
Fill in the blank. It's blank that Tom Brady autographed the ball that 49ers linebacker intercepted after Sunday's game.
It's awesome that Tom Brady autographed the ball for the 49ers linebacker, and I'll tell you why. Because I guarantee, first of all, we're talking about the GOAT of quarterbacks, right? Like, this is obviously the greatest quarterbacks ever played. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame, da-da-da-da-da. And so if I'm a young linebacker in the NFL who probably grew up watching Tom Brady, of course, it's just like these jersey swaps that these guys do. But for an interception as a linebacker, that's a hard stat. Not many linebackers get one. And then to get one off someone like Tom Brady, again, the greatest quarterback to play, and potentially, a guy that I'm assuming this linebacker probably at some point watched growing up, or, he had to watch at some point. So I just think it's a really cool thing. And I'm glad that Tom Brady did it, because I would love to have an autographed football by Tom Brady, especially if I picked him off in an NFL game.
Well, that's like, for guys who are that age, who are, like still early in their career. And here's Tom Brady, who's been playing for more than 2 decades at this point. Like, these guys literally grew up their whole lives. They've spent watching Tom Brady getting ready to go to the Hall of Fame. And then you intercept a pass off Tom Brady. Of course, you're going to want to get that autograph. I'm just shocked that Tom Brady actually signed the autograph afterwards.
He's
That's
becoming
what
weak in
shocks
his
me.
older age.
I think he is. And, he said something to the effect of, it depends on what kind of mood he is. That, that a lot of times he was not necessarily in the proper frame of mind afterwards to do something like that. But I think when you lose as lopsided as Tampa Bay lost that game, his anger was probably gone by late in the third quarter, and it just turned to dismay. So he's like, yeah, whatever. I'll sign your ball, get you out of here, whatever. But that's, I mean, you talk about a cool keepsake, like 40 years from now, that guy's going to have an autographed ball by Tom Brady, and he can say, I intercepted one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history in a game. So it's cool that Tom Brady was a good sport enough to do it. He's getting weak in his old age, Jess. It goes back to what we were talking about last week, last legs. He's going to retire soon.
It's funny you think that. I just think he's fed up with the Tampa situation. He's looking forward to next year, and he was connecting a bridge because we all know that there's potential he's going to play in San Francisco next season.
Yeah, he might. Brock Purdy keeps playing the way he's played. He might not, though. Nobody was talking about that guy. Fair or foul on this question? Missouri head coach Eli Drinkwitz attending last weekend's Kansas-Missouri basketball game at Missouri. First time they've played since the Tigers left the Big 12 for the SEC. Drinkwitz holds up a sign during the game that said 5 level 1 violations. Fair or foul?
To me, that is a big time foul, and I'll tell you why. Everyone knows Kansas got caught up with all the violations that they committed. Right? They served their time. The players served their time. They're amongst many college programs that have had many violations. Some have been, obviously caught. Many have not been caught. So, I mean, I guarantee at some point someone did something bad at Missouri, whether it was basketball, football, everyone, it seems, commits violations. No one's the perfect person. So I just kind of find it foul because of it being so far in the past, right? And maybe that's a tribute to why Missouri got the doors blown off them by 30 points against Kansas, and they were themselves an undefeated team. So I think that maybe Kansas took it a little extra step after seeing that sign.
Couple of different things. Eli Drinkwitz, interesting personality, but I think it's a little bit much for the head coach of you. Like, it's like, okay, you're going to play to your base. Your base is your students and your fan base and all that stuff. And you're one of the guys. You've got your sign up there. Kansas and Missouri used to be huge rivals. Like, it was like, one of the longest running college football rivalries in the game, before Missouri went to the SEC. But it just seems like it's a little beneath the head coach of it's one thing when what's his name? The guy at Auburn, goes and paints his body. Huh?
Oh, sorry. Wrong person. Go ahead.
The basketball coach. You know who I'm talking about. Took him to the Final Four a couple years ago. Bruce Pearl. It's one thing when Bruce Pearl body paints himself and, takes his shirt off and does that thing out in the stands. To be holding up a sign, I think it's a little beneath a head football coach of a team to do that in the stands. But the other part of this is, like tying football back into it, they were trying to set it up like they could have played each other in a bowl game. There was they each have the same record, Kansas and Missouri. They could have played each other in a bowl game, but apparently in, obviously not in playoff games, but in these other bowls, schools have the right of refusal. They can say, we don't want to play this other school if they want to. And Missouri vetoed the opportunity to play Kansas. So not only is he sitting in the stands with this sign up, but he also turned down the opportunity to play Kansas, So again, it's like nanny boo boo type stuff. Grow up a little bit. Eli.
That's honestly the best. He's not quite as bad as what's going on with Texas coach, but we won't get in too deep into all that. But he's in. And I guess the only comment I'll make is I never saw that coming. I've seen interviews with him. I've seen him on the Dan Patrick show. I always thought he was a good guy, but it just seems like he's got himself in a bit of a situation right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's going to do it for tonight. We appreciate you coming by. Again, there is a poll up both on my Twitter account as well as in the Champions Lounge at IB. Which would you rather see? Would you rather IB Nation Sports Talk continue to be at 6 o'clock Eastern time during the week for our live show, or would you rather see it move to 5 o'clock Eastern time for the live show? Let us know. You can cast your vote either in the Champions Lounge or on my Twitter poll. At Sean Stiers is where you can find it, at least for right now. I guess you won't find Jesse there on Twitter much anymore. So
I wanted to address the big elephant in the room. Anthony Solomon brought up earlier. Will there be a whiteboard return in 2023? My whiteboards will only get better in 2023. New year, new whiteboards. And there should be something coming, for the South Carolina game. Don't forget that game is still on the horizon. And as game week approaches, I'll have to be able to
that's true.
Give a couple breakdowns of what I think Notre Dame can accomplish offensively and defensively.
Now, December 30th is when Notre Dame plays in the Gator Bowl. There will be an IB countdown to kickoff. Will you be joining Vince and I for IB countdown to kickoff that day for the bowl game?
Yeah.
You can think about it. Maybe that's the day to bring the whiteboard. We can bring the whiteboard back before that. But
that I'm not good with schedules as of recent. So I can barely keep track of what I got going this week, let alone like 3 weeks from now.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so again, there will be an IB countdown to kick off the day of the Gator Bowl. So when you're home on Friday, I believe it is Friday, getting ready for the Gator Bowl, we'll have IB countdown to kick off that day. And of course, there'll be a post-game show and everything else. So yeah, you're right. There will be a bowl game and a Notre Dame men's basketball game at the same time because the ACC would not change it. I've got the feeling that maybe Jim Phillips is, a little ticked off about the way this whole thing has gone and, stick the screws to Notre Dame a little bit. You want to change your basketball game time? Well, how about you join the ACC full time? Yeah. I don't know. Hey, hit the like button if you would on your way out. We appreciate you. As always, subscribe, rate, and review on all your podcast channels. We will talk to you tomorrow. It's mailbag day tomorrow, so bring your questions. We'll have answers for you, hopefully right here on IB Nation Sports Talk.